Toxic boss thought she could take advantage of me. Seeking advice for petty revenge. The protagonist, we'll call her Sarah, has just secured a job at a small business, excited to start fresh. She quickly establishes herself as a dependable employee with a strong work ethic. However, little does she know that the owner, Carol, already has her sights set on Sarah as a target. Sarah is blissfully unaware of the toxic atmosphere around her. As Sarah begins her routine, she notices that Carol is constantly overbearing and nitpicking her work. She brushes it off as typical managerial behavior. But Sarah can't ignore the subtle criticisms and the constant comparison to other employees. Despite her performance being flawless, Carol seems intent on finding fault. Sarah works diligently, trying to avoid confrontation. But one evening, due to an unexpected personal issue, Sarah's shift goes less than perfectly. She's flustered but does her best to manage the situation. Unfortunately, Carol, who has always been critical, uses this one bad shift as an excuse to let Sarah go, citing it as a reason for her termination. Carol doesn't even offer Sarah a chance to explain herself. Sarah, shocked by the sudden termination, learns that Carol is already replaced her the same day, without even letting her have a chance to prove herself again. Carol's decision feels personal, and it's clear that this was a culmination of a pattern of favoritism and pettiness towards Sarah. Sarah begins to realize that Carol might have been looking for an excuse to get rid of her from the start. Although devastated, Sarah lands a new job soon after and feels a sense of relief. She finds peace in the fact that she's no longer working under a manipulative boss. Still, she can't help but feel the sting of being unfairly let go. Sarah sends Carol a polite message thanking her for the opportunity and apologizing for the one bad shift, hoping to leave things on good terms. A month later, Sarah is settling into her new job and feeling better about her career prospects. That's when Carol messages her, asking if Sarah could come in early to cover for her and her son, who were planning to attend a party. Sarah can't believe it. She's no longer employed there, and after everything that happened, Carol has the nerve to ask her for help. Sarah, taken aback by the request, politely declines. She responds, "Consider what happened last time. I need to focus on my own priorities now." She also wishes Carol well, knowing that it would be a waste of energy to revisit the past. Carol doesn't take this well and sends a series of defensive messages, trying to guilt Sarah into agreeing to help her. Carol's response is a long-winded message, filled with condescension. She accuses Sarah of holding on to hard feelings and explains how growth comes from accepting responsibility and learning from mistakes. Sarah, now frustrated by Carol's hypocrisy, calls her out, stating that she took full responsibility for the mistake and that Carol should reflect on her own behavior as a manager. When Sarah confronts Carol, the boss loses control. Carol starts sending a string of messages, deflecting blame and attacking Sarah personally. She accuses Sarah of being ungrateful and entitled, further showing her lack of self-awareness. Carol even blocks Sarah, only to unblock her later to send more messages. Sarah realizes just how petty and vindictive Carol truly is. Carol's messages become more toxic. She attempts to justify her actions and insult Sarah's work ethic, claiming that she kept her on despite Sarah being a terrible employee. Sarah, with a sense of clarity, realizes that Carol is only trying to drag her into a cycle of petty drama. This is the moment Sarah decides she wants to seek revenge, harmless but effective petty revenge. Sarah takes a moment to gather herself. She doesn't want to retaliate in a way that could damage her own reputation, but she feels a strong need for some kind of karmic justice. She consults friends, Reddit, and even Google for some ideas on petty revenge that could give her satisfaction without landing her in legal trouble. One of Sarah's friends, equally disgusted by the way Carol handled the business, leaves a truthful 1-star review on Yelp. The review describes a lack of sanitation practices and other concerns, which Carol had previously ignored. Sarah feels satisfied as she watches Carol's defensive responses to the review, further exposing her unprofessionalism. Encouraged by the Yelp review, Sarah starts considering other ways to make Carol's life more difficult without going too far. Should she leave negative reviews on other platforms? Should she warn future employees about Carol's toxic management style? Sarah starts plotting her next move carefully. Carol's ongoing obsession with Sarah continues. After sending more passive-aggressive messages, Carol blocks Sarah once again, only to unblock her moments later to send another petty message. Sarah uses this opportunity to expose her lack of professionalism even further, noting Carol's obvious need for control and manipulation. Sarah reaches out to a few former coworkers, asking if they'd be willing to leave honest reviews online about the toxic environment they experienced. Some are hesitant, not wanting to stir up drama, but others agree to help, eager to hold Carol accountable for her behavior. Sarah posts an anonymous message in a local job-seeking group, warning others about Carol's management style. She doesn't reveal her identity, but shares details about how Carol mishandled her employment and how the workplace environment was toxic. Sarah hopes that future job seekers will be more cautious about applying there. Carol begins to notice the growing negative reviews and starts responding to each one, accusing her former employees of having sour grapes. She dismisses every complaint as personal attacks. The more she responds, the more she digs herself into a deeper hole. Sarah watches, amused, as Carol becomes increasingly desperate. One day, Carol sends Sarah a long, accusatory message, questioning why she hasn't let go of the past. She claims that it's time to move on, and that Sarah is only making herself look bad. Sarah doesn't back down, reminding Carol that she never once took responsibility for her actions, and that it's Carol's own toxicity that has led to this point. In a final act of deflection, Carol offers Sarah $100 to come in and help with shift, knowing full well that Sarah wouldn't give her the best version of herself. Sarah laughs it off. The insult is clear, and Carol's desperation only adds fuel to the fire of Sarah's revenge. Sarah, no longer interested in engaging with Carol's nonsense, sends a final, pointed message. She thanks Carol for the opportunity, but makes it clear that she has moved on and will no longer entertain any further contact. She then blocks Carol and finally cuts all ties with her. After blocking Carol for good, Sarah feels a sense of relief, but her mind is still fixated on the feeling of justice she hasn't fully achieved. Carol's persistence in reaching out one last time, offering $100 in exchange for a shift, is the final straw. Sarah laughs it off, understanding that Carol's desperation is now on full display. But it's not enough for Sarah. She begins to wonder how she can escalate things in a way that will truly make Carol uncomfortable but stay within the bounds of legal action. While reflecting on the toxic work environment she endured, Sarah recalls the appalling sanitation practices that Carol's business maintained. After hearing about a few recent complaints regarding cleanliness, Sarah takes matters into her own hands. She decides to send an anonymous email to the local health department, detailing the unsanitary practices in the business. She describes how Carol ignored proper food safety protocols, making it a potential health risk. It's not just petty revenge. It's a way of hitting Carol where it will hurt the most: her reputation as a business owner. Weeks pass, and Sarah doesn't think much more about it. But then, she hears rumors about a surprise health inspection at the restaurant. When the results are made public, Sarah is pleased to learn that the restaurant received several violations for food safety concerns, particularly in the areas of cleaning and sanitizing equipment. Carol, of course, tries to deny any wrongdoing, but the damage is done. Sarah can't help but feel a small sense of vindication, knowing that Carol's negligence has finally been exposed. Carol, clearly frustrated with the mounting pressure from the health inspection, begins venting on social media. She posts long, passive-aggressive messages about how life's lessons have taught her that not everyone is cut out for this business. Sarah sees these posts and can't resist making her own comment. She writes a very tactful, polite response, reminding Carol that growth comes from reflection and holding oneself accountable, just as she told Sarah months ago. Sarah's comment stings, and Carol deletes it almost immediately, which only makes it more satisfying for Sarah. The Yelp reviews about Carol's business continue to pile up, with Sarah's friends and former coworkers contributing to the growing list of complaints. Carol responds angrily to each one, and her defensive responses only make her appear more unprofessional. At this point, Sarah can tell that Carol's control is slipping. She and her circle of friends add honest but critical reviews, focusing on the negative work culture, the poor management, and the lack of professionalism that became a staple of Carol's leadership. Sarah knows the reviews are causing damage to Carol's business, but it's subtle enough not to be outright malicious. Sarah, with the help of a few close friends who are still connected to Carol's business, begins to spread the word about Carol's toxic management style. The message isn't cruel or slanderous. It's just the truth. Former employees tell their stories about working for Carol, how she would treat staff poorly, and the favoritism she showed to certain employees while casting others aside. As the gossip spreads, potential applicants begin to avoid applying for positions at Carol's restaurant. Sarah can tell from her connections that the business is losing talented workers, and Carol's reputation is starting to sour. A few months after Sarah's departure, she notices that Carol's restaurant is struggling. The negative reviews continue, and she learns that business is starting to decline. Sarah can't help but feel like her efforts have contributed to the downfall. But instead of stopping, she decides to turn up the heat in the most calculated way possible. She starts researching Carol's competitors, looking at their business models, strategies, and the way they market themselves. Then, she anonymously tips off one of Carol's main competitors about the flaws in Carol's marketing approach, providing them with information on what could give them a competitive advantage. It's a subtle jab, but one that can make a real impact on Carol's sales. Carol's restaurant continues to experience a slow but steady decline. Customer complaints pile up, and the online reviews keep coming. But Sarah takes it one step further by making a few well-placed calls to Carol's business. Posing as a disgruntled customer, she inquires about booking a party at the restaurant. During the call, she highlights the restaurant's flaws in customer service, subtly ensuring the conversation is more of a public complaint. Sarah records the conversation, legally of course, and later posts anonymously in a local business forum, showcasing the poor customer service and unprofessionalism at Carol's restaurant. Carol, who's always been offensive about criticism, now finds herself in the public spotlight. With everything else going on, Sarah decides to take one last, more subtle form of revenge. She contacts the other employees of the restaurant, former and current, and asks if they'd be willing to share their experiences with Carol. Sarah doesn't push them to speak out. Instead, she simply provides a platform for them to anonymously voice their concerns. Soon, she gathers a collection of testimonials, showcasing the toxic work environment Carol has created. The stories, when compiled, become a powerful statement about the kind of employer Carol has been. Sarah submits the document to various business rating websites anonymously, leaving Carol's true nature exposed for the world to see. Over time, the pressure begins to take its toll on Carol. Her business is losing customers, and the negative reviews are coming in faster than she can delete them. At the same time, her social media presence has become a battleground of angry rants and defensive responses. Carol starts to unravel emotionally, venting to anyone who will listen about how she's being unfairly targeted. Her behavior becomes more erratic, and she begins losing the support of her remaining staff. Sarah watches from the sidelines, feeling a sense of quiet satisfaction as Carol's empire crumbles. Eventually, Carol has to face the consequences of her actions. The restaurant is forced to shut down due to lack of business and the overwhelming negative reviews. Sarah feels no guilt. She's not responsible for Carol's downfall. It's the result of Carol's own behavior. Carol's failure to manage her business and her toxic treatment of employees and customers alike finally catch up with her. Sarah knows she did nothing more than expose the truth, but it feels like the perfect ending to the saga. Carol's restaurant finally closes its doors for good. Word spreads quickly that the restaurant is shuttering, and the news is met with mixed reactions. Some people are relieved, while others are indifferent. Sarah, quietly watching from the sidelines, knows she played a role in this outcome. She feels no guilt, knowing that Carol's toxic management and lack of accountability led to the downfall. As Carol's restaurant fades into obscurity, Sarah reflects on the satisfaction of seeing justice unfold, but she also realizes it's time for her to fully move on. With Carol's business gone, Sarah feels a wave of relief wash over her. The petty revenge has reached its peak, and Sarah realizes she's free from the toxic energy of the past. She's done everything she could to ensure Carol would face consequences. Now, Sarah is ready to leave the situation behind. She focuses on her new job, her personal growth, and her relationships. The weight of the past no longer looms over her, and she can finally breathe easy. Months pass, and life returns to normal for Sarah. She gets promotions at her new job and starts to build a stronger career. She even makes new friends and begins to enjoy life without the shadow of Carol's negativity hanging over her. One day, while at work, Sarah gets a message from a former co-worker telling her that Carol had tried to start a new business but was unable to get off the ground. It's another sign that Sarah's quiet revenge has worked. Carol has been unable to bounce back from the damage caused by her own actions. Sarah feels a mix of satisfaction and peace. While Sarah has been thriving in her new life, she begins to realize that revenge, though sweet, isn't always a path to fulfillment. She no longer feels a need to hold on to the petty victories. Instead, she finds joy in her own growth and achievements. She understands that the best form of revenge is to move forward and succeed, leaving the past and toxic people behind. The petty acts that once felt so satisfying now seem like distractions from the bigger picture of her life. One day, Sarah runs into an old acquaintance at a coffee shop, a mutual friend of hers and Carol's. They chat briefly, and the topic of Carol comes up. The acquaintance mentions that Carol is struggling to find work and is still bitter about losing her restaurant. However, it's clear that Carol's reputation has been permanently damaged. Sarah, however, no longer feels any bitterness or desire for further retribution. Instead, she feels a sense of finality. Carol will continue to struggle with the consequences of her actions, but Sarah has moved on. Sarah receives a final message from Carol, one last desperate attempt at communication. Carol, still struggling, sends a message asking if Sarah would be willing to meet for coffee and talk things over. Sarah knows that Carol hasn't learned anything from her mistakes, but instead of responding with anger or frustration, Sarah simply replies, "I wish you the best, but I'm moving forward." Sarah has no interest in revisiting the past. She's done with it, and so is Carol. As the months roll by, Sarah's life becomes more stable and fulfilling. She reflects on the journey she's been through, from dealing with a toxic boss to executing her petty revenge and finally finding peace. The initial satisfaction of seeing Carol's downfall fades, but the lesson remains. Sarah has learned to let go of negativity and focus on what truly matters. Her career, her personal growth, and her happiness are all within her control, and she doesn't need to waste any more time on people like Carol. The past is finally behind Sarah. She continues to thrive at her new job and develop strong, positive relationships with her colleagues and friends. She's become more confident in her decisions and has learned to avoid toxic situations. Sarah is no longer haunted by Carol's behavior. Instead, she channels her energy into creating the life she deserves, free from drama, revenge, and manipulation. Sarah meets new people, starts new projects, and embraces every new opportunity that comes her way. Her journey has not only been about petty revenge, but about reclaiming her power and her future. Sarah finds joy in the simple things: time spent with loved ones, new achievement at work, and the peace that comes from being true to herself. She no longer looks back, but forward, toward a life full of possibilities. As time passes, Sarah's story becomes just another chapter in her life. She has healed from the toxic experience with Carol and moved on to bigger and better things. She often reflects on the lessons learned from that dark chapter, how she stood up for herself, sought justice, and eventually chose to leave behind the bitterness. Sarah knows that life isn't always about revenge. It's about creating your own path and embracing the future. One final lesson Sarah learns is the power of letting go. By letting go of the need for revenge, she has made space for growth, happiness, and success. Carol's fate is no longer her concern, and Sarah has learned to move on without lingering resentment. Her life is her own now, and she controls her destiny. She feels free. Sarah, now fully at peace, shares her story with others who have faced similar toxic situations. She encourages them to take control of their lives, to stand up for themselves, and never let a toxic boss or manipulative person dictate their happiness. She reminds them that the best revenge is living well, and that there's always a way to rise above the challenges. With Carol's chapter finally closed and the past behind her, Sarah looks forward to a future full of promise and opportunity. The struggles she faced have made her stronger, more resilient, and more determined to live her life on her own terms. Sarah knows that whatever comes next, she will handle it with grace and strength, having learned the ultimate lesson. Revenge is fleeting, but personal growth is forever. Sarah begins to realize that her experiences with Carol, though painful, have shaped her in profound ways. She meets new colleagues at her current job, and for the first time in a long while, she finds herself in a work environment that is supportive and encouraging. The contrast between her toxic previous job and her new one feels like a breath of fresh air. She starts developing strong professional relationships, focusing on mentorship and collaboration. For the first time in a while, Sarah lets her guard down. She had been so afraid of trusting people after her experiences with Carol, but her new colleagues proved to be kind, reliable, and truly supportive. She begins to open up to them about her past, and they respond with understanding, never judging her for the mistakes she made in the past. Sarah feels a renewed sense of hope in human connections. Sarah's hard work pays off when she's offered promotion at her job. She's astounded by the recognition, having come from a place where she was constantly undervalued and belittled. The new role is both exciting and intimidating, but Sarah knows that this is the opportunity she's worked for. She accepts the promotion and sets out to prove to herself that she's more than capable of succeeding. Through her new role, Sarah is exposed to a variety of team dynamics and challenges. One of her colleagues, someone who reminds her of herself in her early days, is struggling with a difficult manager. Sarah reflects on her own experiences with Carol and realizes that part of leadership is empathy and understanding. She offers advice and support to her colleague, helping them navigate the difficult situation. It's a powerful moment of personal growth, as Sarah now actively works to be the kind of leader she always wished she had. Just as Sarah is fully entrenched in her new role, she gets a call from her old co-worker. The co-worker shares news of Carol's continuing downfall. She's lost even more business due to poor management, and her personal life is in disarray. The call, instead of making Sarah feel satisfaction, brings a sense of melancholy. She realizes that while Carol's actions led to her own failure, Sarah doesn't feel the same bitterness she once did. It's clear that Carol's life has become a reflection of her own choices, but Sarah now sees the importance of not letting others' mistakes define her. Sarah looks back over her journey and realizes just how far she's come. Her pursuit of petty revenge has faded into the background, and what remains is a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. She successfully moved on from Carol, not out of spite, but because she has taken control of her own life. Carol's downward spiral doesn't define her. Sarah's future does. She's learned that true success isn't about revenge, but about how you move forward and grow from adversity. Sarah feels content. She's achieved everything she set out to do. She's built a successful career, cultivated meaningful relationships, and reclaimed her own happiness. The world is hers to conquer. And as she moves forward, she knows that nothing and no one, certainly not a toxic boss in the past, can ever hold her back again.